The front gate, shrouded in timeless age, is a Beijing landmark. It's not only a shopping arcade, the front gate area is also a center for leisure. Like the coffee bars in Western society, tea houses function as hangouts for the social and thirsty in the Orient. Here, though, there is one marked difference that I haven't seen in the West: karaoke-style opera. Lao Shi Tea House is well known for providing this kind of entertainment. Every Wednesday afternoon, fans of Beijing opera get together here to enjoy and sing this traditional Chinese art form. 7 yuan is a relatively cheap price to these dedicated opera fans. And despite what you may think, it's not just the older crowd getting involved. There is a lot of young blood taking part too. This breathes new life into the art form, thereby shifting the monopoly usually held by the old folks. Tea houses like this bring Beijing opera to the masses and popularize its aged beauty and charm.
喜欢到这儿唱，心里特别高兴，特别痛快。
家里没有事儿，我基本上都来。
我们玩得很开心，很高兴。
Today we're going to get a grip on Beijing opera. Now, if you've ever watched Beijing opera, you're probably more than a little confused. Well, that's about to change, because on the show, we're going to be poking around behind the scenes, we're going to be speaking to some actors, as well as traveling around China in order to learn about its origins and its influence. So the next time you watch Beijing opera, you'll have a keen insight, hopefully, into this grand Qing Dynasty spectacle. Beijing opera, or Peking opera, is a form of traditional Chinese theater which combines music, vocal performance, mime, dance, and acrobatics. Beijing opera features 4 main types of performers. Performing troupes often have several of each variety, as well as numerous secondary and tertiary performers. With their elaborate and colorful costumes, performers are the only focal points on the stage. They utilize the skills of speech, song, dance, and combat in movements that are symbolic and suggestive, rather than realistic. Melodies include arias, fixed tune melodies, and percussion patterns. The repertoire of Beijing opera has over 1,400 works, which are based on Chinese history, folklore, and increasingly contemporary life. Although it is called Beijing opera, its origins are in southern Anhui and eastern Hubei. It is said that Beijing opera was born when the 4 great Anhui troops came to Beijing in 1790. Beijing opera was originally staged for the court and came to the public later. In 1828, some famous Hubei troops arrived in Beijing. They often performed together on the stage with Anhui troops. The combination gradually formed Beijing opera's main melodies. Beijing opera is generally regarded as having fully formed by 1845. However, it has evolved greatly since then, often mirroring changes in the political climate. In the Beijing Opera Theatre, there is a stunning picture hanging on the wall called 13 Beijing Opera Performers. It was drawn by a folk painter during the Qing Dynasty. These 13 performers were an actual troupe who stepped onto the Qing Dynasty court stage to perform for the royal family in 1861. They were not only performers, but also coaches who strictly gave training to the eunuchs. Later on, a special department was set up in the royal court called Shengping, meaning peace and happiness. From then on, the department actively recruited those in regular society most suited to a life on the stage. The form is regarded as one of China's cultural treasures, and major performance troupes are based in Beijing and Tianjin in the north and Shanghai in the south. Every Beijing opera mask is a makeup masterpiece. Each character's mask has a general style known as facial mask. and they differ from each other as much as their colorful costumes do. The function of the facial mask is simply to exaggerate facial features and parts of roles by using over-top ways to represent the personality of the actors. This ultimately magnifies the depth and meaning of the drama. The facial mask, over time, was developed from simple to complex, from superficial to meticulous, from outside to inside, from shallow to deep, eventually becoming a kind of design art with universal characteristics. Chinese culture is very fond of using color as a representation of an idea or personality. When applying makeup in Beijing opera, every color and pattern has some kind of significance, and the meanings of the colors used here differ from those used in Western cultures. For example, white is used for evil or crafty characters because it symbolizes slyness, whereas in the West, white typically suggests purity or peace. The West uses black to signify those lacking in moral fiber, but in China, black is a symbol of justice and is given to characters of integrity. There are four main character roles within Beijing opera: Sheng, Dan, Jing, Qiu. And they're all easy to tell apart by their makeup, their costumes, and of course their gestures. 3 of them are male and 1 of them is female. So I've been kitted out as a Jing, and then underneath Jing there are some subcategories. So I'm a Jing Bawang, which is like an ancient general. I thought the makeup was going to feel hard and crusty, but it actually feels quite light, just like normal makeup does. Not that I'm used to wearing makeup. I'm just worried at how easy it's going to be to wash it out. The Sheng is the main role in Beijing opera. This role has numerous subtypes including the Lao Sheng, the Xiao Sheng, and the Wu Sheng. These characters have a gentle and cultivated disposition and wear sensible costumes. Young male characters are known as Xiao Sheng. These characters sing in a high, shrill voice with occasional breaks to represent the voice-changing period of adolescence. Depending on the character's rank in society, the costume of the Xiao Sheng may be either elaborate or simple. The Wu Sheng is a martial character for roles involving combat. They are highly trained in acrobatics and have a natural voice when singing. Troupes will always have a Lao Sheng actor. A Xiao Sheng actor may also be added to play roles that fit with his age. The Dan refers to any female role. Dan roles were originally divided into 5 subtypes. Old women were played by Lao Dan. Martial women were Wu Dan. Young female warriors were Da Ma Dan. Virtuous and elite women were Cheng Yi. And finally, unmarried women were Hua Dan. A troupe will have a young Dan for main roles, as well as an older Dan for secondary parts. 4 examples of famous Dans are Mei Langfang, Cheng Yanqiu, Shang Xiaoyun, and Xun Huisheng. In the early years of Beijing opera, all Dan roles were played by men in the Qing court. The Jing is another male role. Depending on the repertoire of the particular troupe, he will play either primary or secondary roles. This type of role will entail a forceful character, so a Jing must have a strong voice and be able to exaggerate gestures. Beijing opera boasts of 15 basic facial patterns, but there are over 1,000 specific variations. Each design is unique to a specific character. The patterns and coloring are thought to be derived from traditional Chinese color symbolism and divination on the lines of a person's face, which is said to reveal personality. 3 main types of Jing roles are often seen and involve singing, martial arts, and acrobatics. The Chou is a male clown role. The name of the role is a homophone of the Chinese word chou, meaning ugly. This reflects the traditional belief that the clown's combination of ugliness and laughter could drive away evil spirits. Chou roles can be divided into Wen Chou and Wu Chou. The Wu Chou is one of the most demanding in Beijing opera because of its combination of comic acting, acrobatics, and a strong voice. Chou characters are generally amusing and likable, if a bit foolish. They wear a special face paint called Xiaohualian. Beneath the whimsical persona of the Chou, a serious connection to the form of Beijing opera exists.
As you can see, I've been learning some of the basic poses, but of course I don't look very graceful yet. These costumes actually date back to the 14th century when early pioneers were first experimenting with this ornate style of clothing. It feels quite heavy, and with all these layers, I actually think that I could go and fight a war and I'd be bulletproof. I'm just hoping that it doesn't affect my acrobatics later on. This is another pose that I learned, something like this.
Peking opera costumes are known as shifu in Chinese. Since each dynasty in Chinese history had its own unique operatic costume, the number of customs were too great for performers to master. So, artists and costume designers worked together to create costumes that would be acceptable no matter when or where the action was supposed to take place. The lavish embroidery that appears on many of the garments is heavily symbolic, often telling stories passed down through the ages.
京剧的服装呢非常美，它讲究一种美，比方说它用的这些水袖，比方它戴的胡子，比方它穿的厚底靴，这些呢服饰的一些安排，都是为了他演员在舞台上展示京剧这些可歌可舞这些程式化的一些表演手段来设置的，没有这个 不能用的东西，只要是演员穿到身上，都是每一个演员用来表演、用来展示他的舞蹈化的动作而设计的。所以说，京剧的服装跟京剧的所有的表演程式是一样的，它讲求程式化，讲求舞蹈化，讲求这个虚拟化，这些东西呢，在表演当中都会充分的得到展示。
When looking at the clothing, audiences can distinguish a character's sex and status at the first glance by the type of headdress, robe, shoes, and belt or baldric associated with the role. Beijing opera emphasizes meaning rather than accuracy. The highest aim of performers is to put beauty into every motion. Many performances deal with behaviors that occur in daily life. However, in accordance with the overriding principle of beauty, such behaviors are stylized to be presented on stage. Beijing opera does not aim to accurately represent reality. Experts of the art form contrast the principles of Beijing opera with the principles of mimesis or imitation that is found in Western dramas. Beijing opera is suggestive, not imitative.
因为京剧的这些程式呢，是历代艺术家在艺术创作当中逐渐的摸索出来的，它是源于生活， 它是从生活当中提炼出来，提炼之后呢，又把它艺术化，又把它美化。比方说我们的这些虚拟性的动作，它还有这个传统系的，还有生活中来源那部分的这个因素。比方说上马，这上马拿回来以后，他跨这步就等于跨到马身上了，但实际演员就拿一个马鞭儿，他就这个表示啊一个上马的一个过程。所以说他这个动作还在，就表明它是源于生活的。但是整个这一套动作下来，你会感到它是一种舞蹈化的美。
In the old days, Beijing opera was only taught in private schools. But after 1949, thanks to government support, many public schools were opened throughout China, thereby increasing its popularity and influence. Back then, it wasn't taught from textbooks, but orally, getting passed down from generation to generation. Becoming a Beijing opera performer requires a long and arduous apprenticeship, beginning from an early age. Before the 20th century, pupils were often handpicked at a young age by a teacher and trained for 8 years on contract with the child's parents. After 1911, though, training took place in more formally organized schools. Performers are first trained in acrobatics, followed by singing and gestures. All schools were closed down in 1931 after the Japanese invasion.
我的祖父呢，就本着啊，就是为了在中国的这个大地上使京剧呢能够一代一代的相传，而且呢，当时的梨园子弟们都很苦，就是京剧演员们家庭嘛都非常的穷苦，想呢为梨园子弟呢办一所能够从事京剧事业的那么一所学校，这样呢牛子厚出资，由我的祖父呢，而且特别聘请了萧昌华先生。 是这个学校的任这个学校的总教习，就是教务长一样那样的，一起商量，这样呢就创办了在中国非常有影响的一所戏校。
Students at these schools rose as early as 5 o'clock in the morning for exercises. Daytime was spent learning the skills of acting and combat. If they made any mistakes, the entire group was beaten with bamboo canes. Schools with less harsh training methods began to appear in 1930.
孩子们是从6岁，有的小的6岁，大一点的8岁、10岁，这样进学校以后要学习8年。他们是边学边演。当时傅连城呢有一个专门的表演的场地，就是我们叫剧场，咱们叫演出的场所。 这个剧场呢，在中国，在北京非常有名，是个老字号，叫广和楼。
Senior students of the training school also needed to perform in the Guanghe Lo Theatre in the evening. Each night, these students experienced different roles and different repertoires. Because of this, Guanghe Lo was an outstanding place to perform. Consequently, from this theatre, many students became famous actors and actresses.
一方面是科班的优越，这些教师啊因材施教，社长办学有方，底下这些教师能够发挥出他们这个传授艺术的这个传承，能够很好的传承因材施教。那么他自己的努力的刻苦，可以说是在社长和这些教习这精神感召之下，都是为事业贡献终身的思想来学习，所以才能够创造出辉煌的流派。
From 1917 onwards, a great many excellent actors came forward. It was a prosperous time for the arts, and the form really matured into something rich and full-bodied. This was the time when Mei Langfang became a household name. Other prominent actors of the time included Yang Xiaolou and Yu Shuyan. During the peak of the Mei Langfang period, Beijing opera was morphed into a visual spectacle. Dancing became a standard feature, and the costumes were altered to fit more with the times. Under Mei Langfang's direction, a long water sleeve was added to the gown. Water sleeves are long flowing sleeves that can be flicked and waved like water. They help to facilitate emotive gestures. In 1949, the Communist Party came into power and the People's Republic of China was founded. All of the Chinese art forms underwent huge change. The social status of the Beijing opera actor was upgraded. Beijing opera stepped out of the theater and into the lives of the common people. Mei Langfang was instrumental in spreading the love of Beijing opera. During the Cultural Revolution, a series of changes took place. The endings of many traditional plays were changed, and visible stage assistants were eliminated. After the end of the Cultural Revolution in the late 1970s, traditional Beijing opera began to be performed again. At that period of time, a series of new plays were created and were called model plays. 8 in particular became popular. The 8 model plays were the most famous of the very few operas and ballets that were permitted during the Cultural Revolution in China. They all have communist or revolutionary themes. Although these works bear unmistakable political overtones, they remain popular today due to their rich artistic value.
一代人们，他对样板戏应该有深厚的感情。今天看起来，那会儿叫样板戏，现在叫现代戏。我倒觉着“样板戏”这个词儿不为过，它就是个标杆儿。那么我们传统戏演传统戏，你有个标准吧？马派名剧、叶派名剧、梅派名剧，它总有一个标准。我觉得那会儿样板戏，它给你设定了一个板儿。这什么叫板儿呢？就是说，在台上的方方面面都有标准的，而且我认为是凝聚了那个时代的艺术家的心血，是他们共同创造的结晶。另外，这些艺术家他都有很深的传统基础，没有这个是演不好现代戏。
Beijing opera once again saw reforms in the 80s. These included the creating of a school of performance theory to increase performance quality, utilizing modern elements to attract new audiences, and performing new plays outside of the traditional canon. In addition, Beijing opera troupes also adopted more unofficial changes. Regional, popular, and foreign techniques have been adopted, including Western-style makeup. The spirit of reform continued during the 1990s. To survive in an increasingly open market, troupes needed to bring traditional Beijing opera to new audiences. In the early spring of 2009, the Chinese Beijing Opera Company celebrated the 30th anniversary of its founding. Chang'an Theatre welcomed many famous Beijing opera artists, including Tan Yunshou, Ma Changli, and Mei Baozhou. It was a lively affair where amateurs and professionals, old and young, shared their common love for opera. I hope after watching the show that you have a better understanding of what Beijing opera is all about. I've found that the more I learn about it, the more I enjoy it. It seems often with things of value, You need to spend a little bit more time with them, unraveling them, before you can fully get the gist of what they're about.